Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to be looking at why our tank pops when I go skidding along the ground. This has been a bug that has been taunting us for quite a while, and it's been really hard and elusive to get rid of. And trust me, it has taken me a very long time to prototype a solution that I think I'm happy teaching you. As you can see, the bug is really intermittent. Sometimes it doesn't happen for a very long time, but sometimes, there you go, we've got a little bit of a pop. We just pop out of the terrain, and we're going to investigate and see why that's happening and also come up with the basic plan for solving that. There we go. Perfect example of what's going wrong. Now, let's dive into the lecture and see why. Before we go diving into the content, I wanted to just hit you with a disclaimer. If you didn't watch the last video because you're already on 4.19, or you did watch the last video and you're already on 4.19, then what I'd like to say is that here I have upgraded a project to 4.19, and that's not exactly the same as having started in 4.19 to begin with, because what I haven't done is I haven't changed the build files to include what you use. So that means, just like the rest of the content here, you're going to have to be looking out for cases where you need to include something differently to what I've done. If I haven't included something and you're getting errors about incomplete types, you will need to include stuff. Same as what we've had before, just a little heads up. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is discuss why this tank is popping up. If we go ahead and grab our controllers or your keyboard and go ahead and hit play with our tank, first thing we'll notice is that it's taking a long time to load up, which is usually a little bit of an alarm bell for me that an ensure has gone off again, even though we tried to fix lots of them in the last lecture. If we go and have a look, you can see that this one's going on wrong in the tank track, and it's again the failure to root begin play, which to my mind kind of signals that we might be forgetting to call super. So let's go over to the tank track CPP and have a look, and sure enough, its begin play does forget to call super. Probably that wasn't a problem in old engine versions, but here it is. So we're going to go ahead and build that, and you can go ahead and do the same thing, update your project, pause the video, and come back when it's done. Okay, so mine's done, and hopefully we'll be able to go back over into Unreal, and that problem should have gone away if I go ahead and clear the logs and go and hit play. This time we get no such begin play errors, and let's go careering around the testing grounds. And there you go, instantly we've got ourselves a popping issue, and it has just popped itself up. We've got some more warnings in here. I'm going to talk about those warnings at a later date, not just yet. Let's keep on track. We're talking about why this tank is popping at the moment. Okay, so that's a little bit of a problem there as well. Keep coming up with these problems. Fantastic, isn't it? Let's just deal with the red stuff. Yep, sure enough, that player tank and controller tank that we were talking about in the last lecture, that's a problem when we depossess. So I knew there was a reason. I was trying to look at that. I thought it was a bit strange, and I wasn't entirely sure. So we're just going to remove the ensure from around player tank and control tank just to make sure. So let's make sure this is absolutely correct. What I was saying before is not player tank and control tank. Let's make sure that's in brackets then. We've just removed the ensure, and we want to make sure that that is exactly the same Boolean expression. Okay, sorry, back to the tank popping. So we did just see the behavior of the tank popping, even though we got a little bit distracted along the way. Oh dear, my window seems to have exploded. There we go, just like the tank has been doing. So if we go along, skidding along, then at some point it is just going to pop up, and it's very unpredictable, very hard to say when this is going to happen or by how much and how long. There you go, that was a bit of a pop. Sometimes it's worse, sometimes it flips you over, sometimes it doesn't. We've done a lot to try and ameliorate the situation, but it's certainly not fixed. So what is the cause of this tank popping? Well, if you think about it, the way we are simulating this tank as far as the physics is concerned, is that it's just this cube. It has very little friction, but it is a cube, and it is being dragged along this surface. Now, we might imagine that the surface is flat, like this, but it is made up of multiple segments, these different segments of the mesh in our terrain. Now, because of the way that the physics engine works, not everything is always 100% accurate. So sometimes you're going to end up with what essentially it amounts to one terrain element being slightly higher than the other. And there's various reasons, and we can't really go into the gritty details of why that is. There's various reasons this might be. Now, obviously what's going to happen here is you try to drag this cube along, it's going to collide with that little cusp, and it's going to flip up your tank, which is the kind of stuff we are seeing. And sometimes it's popping up in the air in a slightly different way, but that's the main idea, and that's why this goes wrong. Now, why don't real vehicles do this? This is going to be your challenge for the lecture, to figure out why the real vehicles don't. So what does a real vehicle have that our tank doesn't? If our tank is just a cube, what elements are there going on in a real vehicle? And then let's think about what is essential for getting the correct behavior in our environment. Let's try and boil it down. So try and boil it down to a physics model, basically the little box models that you can draw out and say, this is essentially what I want to simulate in my physics engine. Try and get it as simple as you possibly can. Just have a go, grab a pen and paper, try and draw something out and see what you can come up with. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, welcome back. So let's have a look. Let's identify why real vehicles don't do this. Now, the two main elements that I come up with is wheels are one and springs are the other. And let's investigate how this works. So if we had just a sprung vehicle, a vehicle that just sits around on these two springs, I've put little blocks at the bottom to simulate the bottom of the spring. What happens if this gets dragged around on the terrain? It's going to be maybe a little bit better, but you are going to get a little bit of tilting over as you hit the cusp until eventually the block will go over. And sure, it's going to be a little bit better, but it's still not quite right. It's quite weird. How about if it were just a wheeled vehicle? We just added wheels onto our tank. Well, then what would happen is the following. We would still hit that cusp pretty hard and pretty fast. And because there's no give in the wheel whatsoever, we're not talking about tires, we're just talking about these solid wheels, as if, you know, the little toy cars that you played with as a kid. If you rolled them along a perfectly flat floor, they were fine. But as soon as they hit anything, maybe like a break in the tiles, they would rise up like this and flip over. And that's exactly kind of what we're seeing with our tank at the moment. And it's what we'd see if we put rigid wheels on the vehicle. But what happens if we combine the two is we get the perfect solution. We get a sprung wheeled vehicle, and in this case it's going to ride up over the cusp because the wheel will just rotate over it, and the spring will compress, meaning that it absorbs some of the shock of the change of direction from the cusp. And that's exactly the kind of behavior we want, and so we can deal with fairly large cusps this way. And that's what we're going to be implementing in the next few lectures. I'm going to figure out how we can create springs and wheels in Unreal using some basic primitives. So that is the physics model for our tank, the sprung wheeled vehicle. We're going to add springs to all the wheels of the vehicle on both sides and make sure that our controlling mechanisms work. So that's great. So to recap, now you should be confident explaining the physics model that we are going to be using for vehicles in any kind of physics engine. So we've discussed why our tank pops, we've identified what real vehicles do that makes it not pop, and we've created our physics model. And furthermore, we've fixed a few bugs. So if we have a look in source tree, we should be able to see that we fixed a bug in the AI controller. We had that ensure problem when the tank died, and we also had that begin play problem with the tank track, and we fixed both of those too in this lecture. Right, I'll see you in the next lecture where we'll get started on the basics for implementing this.